Chancellor, Archbishop Desmond Tutu, who helped us frame our humanity by, like Nelson Mandela, offering the hand of peace and love to those who have behaved so brutishly. A moral compass if ever there was one. The Arch believes in people, believes that we humans are predisposed to creating moral systems. And
Good evening and a very warm welcome to the University of the Western Cape. Once again, it's the venue for the annual Desmond Tutu International Peace Lecture. Well, if you didn't know, the Archbishop is celebrating his 82nd birthday today. He was born on the 7th of October in 1931 in Klerksdorp in the Northwest. Now, as part of his celebrations, he's always hosting an annual lecture. Now, this year's guest is none other than the former UN Secretary General, Mr. Kofi Annan. This is the third year in a row that this lecture has been hosted. The first in 2011 was delivered by the friend of the Archbishop, the Dalai Lama, but he did that via video link because he could not get a visa in time to deliver the lecture in the country. Now, last year's lecture was also delivered by the international human rights activist and wife of former President Nelson Mandela, Mrs. Graça Machel. Now, this year's lecture will be delivered by Mr. Annan. Annan, like Archbishop Desmond Tutu, is a Nobel Peace Laureate and also is a part and parcel of the international group called the Elders, which is the highly and most influential leaders in the world. Now, to take us more on this issue is the professor of the University of the Western Cape, who's at the podium to take us through the proceedings.
It's my pleasure to introduce our Reverend Desmond Tutu. You're really a role model for our young people, for our young women, with your strength and your courage.
Before I speak, I'm going to invite Vimla Pillay to lead us in prayer.
Revered guests and revered guests, my warm and humble greetings to all of you. I will share with you a prayer in a language and religion that dates back 5,000 BC. It will be read in Tamil, a South Indian language, and it is a Tamil prayer. It's called Podu Manipu. It goes as follows, and I hope you will share with me. I will read in Tamil first and then in English, the translation. Om Parisuttamana Niramaya Devame, இந்த பந்த பூஜை உலகம் அறியாமையால் செய்த பிழைகளுக்காக எங்களை மன்னித்து காப்பாருவாய் கடவுளே. ஓம் ஆதி முதற் பொருளே, எல்லா ஜீவாத்மாக்கள் உலங்களில் நிறைந்த அம்மை அப்பனே, கிருபாகர மூர்த்தியே, நாங்கள் வாழும் இந்த பூமண்டலமானது இன்பங்களாலும் துன்பங்களாலும் நிறைந்து இருப்பதால், ஓம் கருணாகர கடவுளே, எங்களுக்கு துணை இருந்து காப்பாயாக. ஓம் ஏகங்கமான பொருளே, உன் அருளால் பெற்ற மூலாதாரம், சுவாதித்தாரம், மணிப்பூரகம், அநாகதம், விஷுதி, அனி, ஸ்வஹஸ்ரஹா, கண்களாலும் காற்களாலும் செவிகளாலும் மனதாலும் அறிவாலும் நாவாலும் கைகளாலும் உடலாலும் அறியாமையால் இருந்த பிழைகளுக்காக மன்னித்து அரும் பொருள் இன்பம் வீடெங்கும் நான்கும் எங்களுக்கு அருளை திரு இருப்பாயாக. Om Namah Shivaya. And the translation is as follows. It is a prayer expressing deep gratitude and asking for forgiveness and guidance. Om, the Absolute, the Pure, and the all-forgiving Lord and Mother of the universe, O gracious Lord Shiva and the Divine Mother Shakti, the very form of love and bliss, the creators of the universe and the sacred Hindu scriptures. Lord and Mother, you are all the elements in one, the earth, air, fire, water, and ether. Praise and thanks to you, O form and formless one. You have no beginning and no end. It is through your bliss and your supreme intelligence that we are able to realize your omnipresence, your omniscience, and your omnipotence. We offer praise to you, O Lord and Mother of the universe, for granting us this powerful human form. It is through your grace that we have this human body, with all its parts, eyes to see, ears to hear, a mouth to speak and to eat with, legs to walk, hands to work with, a mind to think, and an intellect to be discerning. Thank you for the 7 spiritual psychic centers, namely the 7 chakras, that help us to take us on the spiritual evolutionary journey. Let us not hurt, humiliate, harm, or destroy each other, but rather to live in love, peace, and in harmony. We thank you, Lord and Mother, for your protection and your guidance, and your numerous gifts to us in various forms. We thank you for helping us remove false illusions, and through studying your scriptures to be able to become discerning, truly spiritual individuals, and to hold humanity in reverence. Thank you for the challenges in life, as these offer us deep growth experiences, the journey to spiritual evolution, and eventually to Samadhi and Nirvana, as taught by you, is a long and sometimes painful one. Yet, it is the most enriching experience we can pursue. Thank you, Lord, for opening our minds and our spirits to learning and to growth. Lord, we ask for forgiveness for errors committed knowingly and unknowingly.
Is that fine? Good evening and a very warm welcome to the University of the Western Cape. Once again, the venue for the annual Desmond Tutu International Peace Lecture. Now, if you didn't know, it is the Emeritus Archbishop Desmond Tutu's 82nd birthday today. And by way of celebrations, is hosting an annual lecture. The person who's expected to deliver that lecture is former UN Secretary General, Mr. Kofi Annan. Mr. Annan is the chairperson of the international group of highly influential leaders called the Elders. Now, he assumed the responsibility following the ceding of that position by the Archbishop. And on the guest list today is a variety of people who have touched lives in the terms of humanitarian work, and it is by no means a way of saying that Mr. Annan is also going to be touching on the way of humanitarian work that he's been doing around the globe, as well as work in Syria. And we're now crossing back inside in the main hall where he's expected to deliver the lecture.
Family could be likened to a tree. The parents are the seeds. They provide the healthy roots and trunk structure. The branches and foliage are the myriad neighborhoods and societies and enterprises, scholarship programs, research fellowships, and local initiatives for good among them that operate relatively autonomously of one another. They're not always aware of their interdependence. Perhaps it would be apt to label it an Ubuntu tree. This is the tree you see before you as the symbol of the Desmond and Leah Tutu Legacy Foundation. We're not botanists, but it is the only species we know of that produces fruits of many colors all year round. It's a tree representing our community, a family that includes many members of the audience tonight, and others who will be joining us electronically for our Ubuntu Train conversation at the Cape Peninsula University of Technology tomorrow. This space here at the University of the Western Cape is integral to our community. This is where Archbishop Tutu and Professor Jakes Gerwel, then Chancellor and Vice-Chancellor respectively, presided over graduations for so many years. It is a community that extends from this former university of struggle to a university that could be described as once having been the intellectual crucible of apartheid, Stellenbosch, alma mater of the likes of Hendrik Verwoerd, and all the way to King's College in London and Freya University in Amsterdam. Just an hour ago on this campus, the Archbishop witnessed the signing of a new partnership between Freya University and the National Research Foundation that will see the creation of 60 more Desmond Tutu PhDs. The Legacy Foundation was established in 2011 after members of the family met and determined that the Ubuntu tree was a tree worth preserving, with all its fruits and leaves and twigs and branches. I can assure you, it's not quite as simple as fencing it off to stop people carving their names on the trunk. The foundation provides the platform for the continuation of old partnerships and the creation of new relationships to continue the work. The circumstances and sites of struggle may have changed over the years, but the universal principles that Desmond and Leah Tutu have articulated throughout their lives remain as relevant today and for tomorrow. Servant leadership, flourishing people, and a healthy planet. The Legacy Foundation provides a centralized forum to align, guide, promote, and support the preservation of the Ubuntu tree and to stimulate new growth. It houses the Archbishop's office, and here is one thing on which I must agree with the National Party. He is as impossible to manage as they said he was. It is responsible for administering his physical and intellectual property. Among the highlights on our calendar is the annual Desmond Tutu International Peace Lecture, an African platform for the exchange of global intellectual ideas about peace. We send warm greetings from Cape Town to His Holiness the Dalai Lama and Mrs. Gracia Machel, who preceded tonight's esteemed speaker on this stage. Thank you to Mr. Annan for agreeing to grace our platform tonight, to the staff and members of the Legacy Foundation and UWC who put tonight's event together, and to all of you who have joined with us. We're particularly grateful to those who have traveled from afar. It is our dream that new generations will find shelter under the Ubuntu tree, with a new set of tools to advance the principles of servant leadership, fertilizing that tree for eternity. And happy birthday, Mommy and Daddy. We love you and we treasure you.
It's my honor, my pleasure, to call on our own arch to come forward to introduce our keynote speaker. To the arch. The arch can be impossible, and I can also be impossible.
I don't know what you're going to say.
I'm so nervous to introduce Mr. Annan. I can't do it. The arch must do it.
No.
Oh, it's your birthday.
I knew he'd come up.
Oh, it's so wonderful to be here. I was here for what, 20-something years, 25. Somebody has displaced me. He kicked me out of my house there. I mean, and now he's kicking me out. He's kicked me out of this place. But here I am. Thank you, all of you, for coming. Thank you, visitors from Canada, from the United States, from UK, from the Netherlands, from Denmark, beautiful singers. I'm not going to, so you see, I won't, after Kofi's speech, come up here and say anything. I'm preempting it all. To say a very, very big thank you to you. The fact that you have come out in such large numbers demonstrates the high regard, quite rightly, that you have for tonight's lecturer. What should I say? I mean, he, as you know, was one of the few, people of my complexion. Why are you laughing? Yes, to be in that exalted position. But before he did that, he was actually doing a great deal of peacekeeping work for the United Nations. So he knows what he's speaking about when he looks at places such as Syria. And as you know, even there, he recently was the envoy to try to try and tell people that bombs are not nice. You know, as we sit here, can you imagine? We're sitting here and it's all very, very nice. We're laughing and we're going to listen to a superb address. We've listened to beautiful girls singing beautifully. But at this moment, children are dying. Mothers are carrying whatever they can carry on their heads, running away. Not just in Syria. Just think of what's happening in the DRC. You know, I've said, I'm so glad I'm not God. But, I mean, can you imagine what it must be like to be God? I mean, I really feel sorry for God. Looking down and saying, you know, those are my children. In Syria, those who use chemical weapons are my children. And those who are dying are my children. And God, you know what? God is crying. And God says, okay, I'll have people like Kofi try to put sense in the heads of my other children. And we are very deeply blessed. He's a very, very distinguished person. But when you meet him, you are unaware that it is someone with all of that distinction. He is actually humble. Unfortunately, you won't see he's blushing.
That is true, it blush. Yeah.
They love you, Kofi.
Yeah. Thanks. Don't laugh. We do blush. And when we do, we become so imperceptibly gray. We know it, but others don't see it. Professor O'Connell, thank you for having us on this campus today. Daddy and Mommy, dear friends, it is a privilege to be here to deliver this third annual International Peace Lecture. This is a prestigious series. And I would like to thank the university and the foundation for the invitation. It is a particular pleasure to be able to join you on Archer's birthday, and it is wonderful to see so many old friends. The goal of these lectures is to provide an opportunity to discuss how we can build societies which are cohesive and inclusive and reduce conflict. On a continent that has suffered so much from deadly violence and inter-ethnic strife, it is essential that we never lose sight of that ambition. It is a goal which Archbishop Tutu has worked for all his life with unmatched persistence and passion. Desmond has always found the courage, no matter how uncomfortable or dangerous, to speak truth to power. By giving voice to the excluded and persecuted, he has become a symbol for justice and reconciliation. He reminds us all of our common humanity and spirituality. As a fellow member of the elders, I think the two of us, Arch, are the only ones in the room who are certified elders. As a fellow elder, I have seen firsthand how his mischievous personality, good humor, and optimism inspires hope and change. And nowhere has this impact been more significant or transformative than in this country. In 2 decades, South Africa has overcome apartheid to become an important regional and global player. You have a reasonably healthy economy and a young and entrepreneurial society whose influence extends far beyond your borders. These remarkable changes have both mirrored and helped drive progress across our continent. Not for half a century has Africa been so confident, and there has been so much confidence in the future of this continent. Sub-Saharan Africa is the world's most recent economic success story. The IMF predicts that between now and 2015, 7 of the 10 fastest growing economies in the world will be in this region, our region. Many countries have made significant progress in achieving the Millennium Development Goals. The spread of HIV/AIDS is in decline, and the number of deaths from tuberculosis and malaria is reduced. We have also seen encouraging progress towards gender parity, and we can be proud that the continent is on track to achieve universal primary education. Democracy is taking root, and modern information and communications technologies have enabled citizens to become more engaged and empowered. Civil society is transforming debate, widening participation, and helping to set the agenda. But real and exciting as this progress has been, we cannot afford to become complacent. After all, Africa has endured false dawns in the past. If we analyze our recent achievements more closely, we will find that serious challenges remain and new threats are emerging. Unfortunately, impressive growth has not eradicated extreme poverty, particularly in rural areas. Neither has it reduced the high levels of inequality which exists across the continent. Unemployment, particularly for the youth, remains high. Despite Africa's extraordinary wealth of natural resources, poor governance and lack of transparency have too often led to corruption, exploitation, and environmental damage. We are also seeing the impact of climate change on water supplies, agricultural productivity, and the environment. As a result, food and nutrition insecurity is rising, while increasing tensions over dwindling resources could lead to violence. The rise of organized crime, including drug trafficking, risks eroding the fragile institutions of governance and development progress throughout the continent. As the recent terrorist attacks in Nigeria and Kenya have underlined, extremism and proliferation of armed groups pose a serious threat for peace and security. So how can we address these challenges and create the peaceful, cohesive societies to enable every individual to thrive and live in dignity? There is, of course, no single answer. The challenge is to deepen democracy and build effective and legitimate institutions grounded in the rule of law and respect for human rights. Let me set out what I believe are the priorities. First, we must turn our backs on the winner-takes-all approach to politics, which has been so damaging to our continent. We have seen how this has led to abuses of power by the winner and encouraged losers to reject democracy as a peaceful means for change, as an accepted means of democratic rotation of leadership. Too often, the individual interests of leaders have been misconstrued as interests of their country. Political leaders who derive their position and legitimacy from the people and are elected to serve them can never be considered above the law. Genuine multi-party democracy provides mutual security to political opponents and encourages them to take part in the process rather than seek to subvert it. Across Africa, the role of legitimate opposition and the need for multiplicity of voices must be appreciated and nurtured. After all, it is transparent and accountable institutions, not strong men or strong leaders, that safeguard democracy and create the conditions for peace and prosperity. In this regard, I believe that parliaments and local authorities, the politicians in the closest contact with citizens, have an important role to play. Second, we must improve electoral integrity. Elections provide citizens the opportunity to debate priorities, choose their leaders, and hold them to account without fear of repression or violence. But sadly, elections in Africa, as in other parts around the world, can become a trigger for conflict rather than a peaceful way to regulate competition for political power. The Global Commission on Elections, Democracy and Security, which I chaired, included a definition for electoral integrity in its final report. We found that it must be based on the democratic principles of universal suffrage and political equality, and must be professional, impartial, and transparent in its preparation and throughout the electoral cycle. When elections lack these characteristics, citizens lose trust in the democratic process and look to other ways to have their voices heard. But taking to the streets, as we have learned all too often, is not an alternative to the ballot box. When conducted with integrity, elections bolster democracy, promote development, and produce governments which are more likely to represent their citizens' interests. And in doing so, they allow us to manage societal conflicts in a peaceful manner. Third, we must do more to uphold the rule of law and combat impunity. On a continent that has experienced deadly conflict, gross violations of human rights, even genocide, I am surprised to hear critics ask whether the pursuit of justice might obstruct the search for peace. In countries as far apart as Rwanda, Bosnia, and Timor-Leste, we have learned that justice is not an impediment to peace, but a partner. When we abandon justice to secure peace, we most likely get neither. The parallel pursuit of justice and peace does present challenges, but they can be managed. We must be ambitious enough to pursue both and wise enough to recognize, respect, and protect the independence of justice. And we must always have the courage. We must always have the courage to ask, who speaks for the victims? Who speaks for the victims? For too often, on many occasions, we have failed the victims of the worst crimes by neglecting to bring the perpetrators to justice. Correcting this failure was a primary aim when the international community created the International Criminal Court. I was there in Rome at the time, and I urged the delegates in that conference center to act as if the eyes of the victims of past crimes and of the potential victims of the future ones are firmly fixed upon us. In adopting the Rome Statute, the international community courageously tipped the balance away from impunity in favor of justice. I was proud that so many African countries with judicial systems that are weak and divisions that run deep provided such strong support for the court. I am therefore concerned by recent efforts to portray the court as targeting Africa. I know this is not the case. In 4 of the cases on Africa before the court, African leaders themselves made the referral to the ICC. African leaders sent the cases to the ICC. In 2 others, Darfur and most recently Libya, it was the United Nations Security Council and not the court which initiated proceedings. When I meet Africans from all walks of life, they demand justice. Justice from their national courts, if possible, from international courts, if no credible alternative exists. Let me stress that it is the culture of impunity and individuals who are on trial at the International Criminal Court, not Africa. Ladies and gentlemen, in a world that is becoming smaller and increasingly interconnected, the diversity of religious beliefs, cultural practice, and ethnicity is increasingly evident. Sometimes these differences appear so great, we lose sight of our common humanity. But those societies which embrace diversity as a source of strength become healthier, more stable, and prosperous. In those which do not, whole communities can feel marginalized and oppressed, creating conditions for conflict. There is no doubt that plural societies can be challenging to govern. Appropriate laws and institutions are needed to manage different needs and interests and to protect the rights of each individual. Mechanisms at the community level can be effective by promoting dialogue and diffusing tensions. And much can be achieved through our education systems to combat fear, intolerance, and extremism. Violence towards those who are different from us or with whom we disagree is unacceptable and has no place in healthy societies. We have to learn from each other, making our different traditions and cultures a source of harmony and strength. There is a crucial role here for Africa's religious leaders in promoting tolerance, understanding of our common humanity. We need them at every opportunity to denounce violence, discrimination, including on the grounds of gender and sexuality. Perhaps above all, they must welcome and safeguard the freedoms of all faiths, not just their own. And I have often stated that the problem is not the faith, it's usually the faithful. I don't understand, nor do I underestimate. I do understand, and I do not underestimate how challenging this can be. But we need not look further than Archbishop Tutu for a role model. It is not just our religious leaders who have a responsibility to play their full part in building genuinely cohesive and inclusive societies. So must our continent's intellectuals and academic institutions. Our universities are an important and intrinsic part of our societies. They have enormous contributions to make through research, promoting dialogue and debate, and providing policies and advice on the 21st century challenges we face. They must work hand in hand with governments, civil society, and the private sector to promote peace and progress. Finally, I would like to underline the urgent need to empower women and promote gender equality on our continent. The evidence is overwhelming that the healthiest societies are those which promote gender equality and invest in girls' education. It is simply wrong that in some parts of Africa, traditions such as child marriage and female genital circumcision are still commonplace and defended as acceptable practice. I'm also deeply concerned that in too many countries, there remains a high level of violence, including sexual violence against women. We know that no single factor can be more effective in furthering development than the empowerment of women and girls. So we must dedicate ourselves to transforming relations between men and women at all levels of society and put the welfare of women and girls at the heart of all we do. Let me end on a note of optimism. Africa is a continent with tremendous natural resources, but none more than the talent of its young people. As I know from my discussions with them, and I speak to them often, they care deeply about our world and are actively engaged in fostering positive changes in their local communities. We need to do more to provide the conditions where their creativity and potential can flourish and where they can have a voice in finding solutions. And if I may speak directly to the students and the young ones amongst us, let me add this plea. You are the first generation of true global citizens. We need you to step up, take responsibility, and above all, we need your leadership. With courage and vision, Africa can develop the institutions and qualities of leadership that will ensure a stable, prosperous, and equitable society. But my dear friends, we must always remember that cohesive and healthy societies rest on three pillars. The first is peace and security. The second is development. And the third is rule of law and respect for human rights. There can be no long-term security without development. And there can be no long-term development without security. And no society can long remain prosperous without rule of law and respect for human rights. Finally, my dear friends, let me wish both Desmond and Leah a very happy birthday. Thank you. Thank you.
Tell the love of Africa by the hills and waters. Almighty bless Africa by your sons and daughters. Tell the love of Africa by the hills and waters. Almighty bless Africa by your sons and daughters. I think we're all blessed tonight. It's about humanity, it's about integrity, it's about reconciliation, it's about democracy. And tonight we heard that democracy can't just be a word. It needs to be actively being implemented by programs like our wonderful Desmond and Leah Tutu Foundation. I think we're all blessed that we have this foundation in South Africa. So please read about the foundation, that we can spread the peace and the values of the foundation. Thank you for being here, Mr. Annan, for embracing these values and to spread it in the corners when the cameras are not there, when it's uncomfortable, to spread the word of peace. I'm now going to open up the floor for questions and answers, but I'm going to be very strict. You are not going to tell me your background. You're going to ask a question very directly. Afterwards, we will go to the marquee, and then we will introduce you to the Arch and Kofi Annan, and then you can give all your CV, because otherwise we're going to lose the gist, and then our wonderful guest must leave, and we didn't ask the specific questions. So this is how the rule's going to be. Is that fine, Arch? Why are you all so serious now? I'm going to ask at the back first. I'm going to ask 1, 2, 3, 4 questions. Anybody want to? I'm going to have 6 questions, and then we're going to try to answer it, and then I will take another round. Is that fine with our guest? Is that fine? Are you going to answer some questions? Because we thought maybe they will address questions.
Okay. If then we both said that. Arch is also.
Yes.
Then I'll sit next.
Yes. If you want to answer questions. Oh, Arch don't want to answer questions. It's his birthday. Okay, at the back there, anyone that would like to pose a question? Can the ushers can you please stand that we're going to make this very snappy and to the point. Thank you. Okay, over there. I will acknowledge. I just want to do the back so that I know that's finished. Okay, you can pose your question. Thank you.
Hi, Mr. Annan,
You can say your name.
My name's Anton Katz. My question to you is this. You suggested that we are the first, well, not we, but the students...
Can you speak up?
Sorry.
Can't hear you.
We are the first group of global citizens. How do we have global citizens in a world of nation states?
Okay, thank you. The next question. Global citizen. No, miss. At there. Anybody at the back? I'll give you now. Okay, pose your question. Thank you, sir.
Hello, my name is Joseph. I'm a UWC student. And I have a question for Mr. Annan.
I think the microphone is too close to you. I can't hear you.
Yeah, I would like to speak up. My question is, while you were a UN Security Council, what did you do to solve the problem in DRC, while they were rebel approaching the capital city of Kinshasa?
Okay, thank you. DRC.
DRC.
Over there, thank you. You may pose. Thank you. You can, the mic, please. Can the ushers be just snappy? Okay, ask your question while they bring him the mic. Yes.
Hi, my name's Tricia. I'm from the Child to Child Trust in London. Hello, can you hear me? Yeah, that's better. Yes. I'm from the Child to Child Trust in London, and we promote children's participation. And Mr. Annan, you said that children and young people should be actively involved in promoting positive change in their communities, but that they need support to find solutions. What support do you think young people and children need, and what can you collectively as a group do to provide it?
Okay.
So I didn't get the question here.
It's about what do you support give to children in the survival areas. Okay. Can you pose specific your question about the children before
Yes.
the pre-app? Yes.
What support can you provide? You said you were talking about the critical importance of children and young people and the role that they're going to play in transforming all of our futures. And I'm asking specifically, what can we do to make that support a reality for children and young people? What should we all collectively be contributing?
Youth development and child support. Okay, program. Okay, sir.
Thank you. My name is Andy Lenomlal. I just have one quick question to Mr. Annan. How does he expect Africans to respect the ICC when the most criminals of this world sitting in the US are not signatories of the ICC? Thank you.
Thank you. Luca Nyovanga from the Pan-Africanist Student Movement of Azania. Luca Nyovanga from the Pan-Africanist Student Movement of Azania. Mine is also a follow-up question around the ICC. You make a pragmatic defense of the ICC by citing who the complainants are, that being Africans. However, is there a moral justification or a moral defense to the ICC when they have clearly undermined the peace project in Africa by charging sitting presidents, an example in Sudan, and also undermining the peace project in Kenya by charging the president there, president-elect? Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Now we will give over to the Honorable Annan.
Good. I think when I talk about global citizenship, I'm not talking about global citizenship in the sense of one passport. Today we live in such an interdependent world, and we have young people today who through electronic means are connected with other people across the world. And I think they know at their age, much more than we did when we were their age, that whatever you do, you ought to understand that it may have impact on other side. No country lives in isolation. What happens in one country can have an impact on others far away. So we need to be consciously aware of the interconnection between us. And I think the young people of today understand that. And it is from that sense that they are the global citizens of today. And they also know that they can make an impact or contribution at their community level, at their university. They don't have to necessarily be in an international organization or head of a big corporation to make a contribution. But that awareness that we are all in the same boat and we are interconnected, and what they do will impact on others, is what makes them the global citizens. On the question of DRC, the world and Africa has had difficulties with DRC, I would say going back to 1960. And we must remember that was also there that the Second Secretary General of the UN, he was working in Congo. He died in Ndola, but the crises were already there. In the 60s, UN had troops in Congo, and we still have the troops there now. Obviously, the international community can help, but my appeal will be to my Congolese sisters and brothers that they also have a role to play. The international community, the UN agencies, peacekeepers can help, but the ultimate solutions has to come from the people, and they should also be able to organize themselves to put pressure on their leaders or get rid of some of the leaders who have brought such misery and nightmare to them. On the question of support to youth and children, it starts with education. We are now insisting that almost every child should have a primary education. Millions of children around the world don't even have that. It starts with education, health, and preparing them for the community and the world they are going to live in. And this is why governments must have the right policies and the right approach and invest in society, invest in education, invest in health, invest in infrastructure and energy to be able to unlock the potential of this continent. And I now have two questions on ICC. I think there's quite a serious misunderstanding about the role of the ICC. The ICC is a court of last resort. Ideally, governments should trial their own people at home. Governments should have the right, competent courts to put criminals on trial at home. And in fact, you mentioned the case of Kenya. In the case of Kenya, where I was intimately involved, we pleaded with the government to set up a local tribunal to trial the people. Some of it, just to refresh your memories, after the December 2007 elections in Kenya, there was conflict over the results. The President Kibaki was sworn in at midnight. His party thought they had won. The opposition felt they had won. So here you had one party saying, we have won fair and square, and another party saying, you've stolen it fair and square, and we don't accept it. That is when I went in with two other panel members, Graça Machel and former President Mkapa of Tanzania, to help resolve the conflict. We were able to get them to stop the fighting and accept a national government of but at the end, 1,200 people were killed. 650,000 people were uprooted from their homes. Some are still today, 6 years on, are still in camps. Not a single person has been put on trial for the loss of 1,200 lives and 650,000 people uprooted. Kenya had the chance to do that. We even encouraged them. A committee was set up, chaired by a Kenyan judge. 3-man committee, chaired by Judge Waki, and there was a third person a second member from New Zealand, and a third one from Democratic Republic of Congo. They traveled around the country, talked to lots of people, getting hearings, and gathered evidence and information. And with a sealed envelope, the sealed envelope was given to me. They said, when the Kenyan government sets up a local tribunal, you give this envelope to the prosecutor. And when they fail to do it, hand it over to the ICC prosecutor. Twice, the Kenyan parliament voted down the attempt to to set up a local tribunal. I was to have handed over the envelope fairly promptly, but I held on to it for another 3-4 months to give them time to set up the tribunal. And when they failed to do it, the envelope went to the prosecutor of the court, who began his own investigations and ended up with 6 cases, but 3 have been dropped. And so we are dealing in a situation where there's complementarity. If the local courts are competent and they are able to take on the case, you don't need ICC. And if we are convinced that all the African countries have fair judicial systems and the victims' interests will be looked after, then we have no problem. But when I hear the debate going on, the leaders are protecting themselves. No one speaks for the victims. No one is asking what happened to the displaced persons who are still in the camp. I think someone should speak for the little ones and look after their interest. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, thank you. And I know that quite a few leaders are resisting and fighting the ICC. But as I said, if they had done their work, ICC would not have been in. But if they go and fight ICC and try to take the cases out when they don't have an alternative, when they are not worried about the victims, if they fight the ICC, vote against the ICC, withdraw their cases, it will be a badge of shame for each and every one of them and for their countries if they do that.
Thank you. Can we have 2, please? Okay, ushers, you need to be quicker. Okay, the lady with the red. Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
I've got a question.
Can you just say what's your name? What's your name?
Damaris Kiewicz from Sengogo, Western Cape. Based on your response around development and human rights, we're in a country where civic education funding is not allowed. And if I say not allowed, civic organizations over the year had to shut its doors because funding has not been made available. We are heading towards the 2014 elections, and no civic education has started in our country. Yet we see 1,800 violent protests, and it cannot be measured as a yardstick for prevention of violence for the 2014 elections.
Question?
The question is, what do we do and how do we educate in the absence of resources?
Thank you. Thank you. The here in front and then there, yes. And then I'm going over. Thank you.
Thank you. My name is Abungile Mchokozeli from the Democratic Alliance Student Organization. My question to Mr. Annan is, most decisions taken in the UN are about Africa, yet Africa does not have a permanent seat in the UN. What have you, as former secretary, done to ensure that Africa plays an active role in decision-making within the UN? Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Lady at the back, this side, finish, this side. Yes.
Thank you. Good evening. My name is Insaf. I'm from UCT. The shape and direction of student activism in South Africa has taken a very different shape and form relative to our...
A bit louder, please.
Oh, sorry. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
All right. So I'm Insaf from UCT. Student activism in South Africa has taken on a very different shape and direction relative to our reference point when we think of the Soweto uprisings and the activism referenced by Madam Program Director. However, in the words of our Vice-Chancellor, he says that if students want to see change, or if young people want to see change, they need to self-coordinate. Now, as a young student activist, it's difficult to realize this change with limited time, networks, and expertise. And I'd like to publicly request that the Desmond and Leo Tutu Foundation, along with yourself, Kofi Annan, avail your expertise, your network, and your time to help us realize the change, starting with the drafting of a Students' Rights and Responsibilities Charter. Thank you.
Thank you. That's a comment. Take that as a comment. Thank you very much. This side.
Thank you very much. Yeah.
Just two here, and then we're going to answer. The gentleman, and then there at the back.
Thank you very much. Hello.
Where are you, sir? Please, I gave the right to the sir, and then I will give you. Thank you very much, sir. Thank you.
My name is Lita Bam. I'm an artist, and I am one of those artists that believes that, just as you said, that academics, etc., can play a role in furthering Africa's development. I believe that artists also have an important role to play. What is your suggestion to me as an artist in terms of what I could possibly do to initiate that change?
Thank you very much, Program Director. My name is Tembaletu Andile Kolo. I come from Youth Development Council. My question to you, Mr. Annan, is one. As you have said, that Africa is seen as one of the fast-growing economical places in the world. Now, my question is, how can we make sure that the Africans, specifically the black Africans, benefit in these resources of Africa in ensuring the growth and then the capacity of us as Africans to grow? Thank you very much.
Mr. Annan said, a woman, come. You pose your question. Yes, the mic. You know, I'm disabled, but I can run faster than the ushers. You forgot, Mr. Annan. Disability. Forget, you must put it in your speech. Empowerment of persons with disability. Yes, we give. That's the last speaker.
Okay, can you hear me? I don't know if it's... Hi. Okay. My name's Anade. I wanted to ask, when you call for youth participation in kind of politics and in development, how do you propose to draw the youth away from the financial temptation of the corporate world and of the world of materialism and into organizations that are perceived as dying, such as the United Nations? That's my question.
Okay. That's right.
Okay. We're going to answer. Thank you.
That's it?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you very much. You've asked many questions. I think the question of civic education and in preparation for elections are very important. Obviously, the government has a role to play. The political parties have a role to play, and so does civil society. And even university students on your campuses, you can play a role, or when you go into your communities, you can play a role. You have to be creative. Where you lack the resources or the resources are not coming, you have to find ways of reaching out. I know that in situations where lots of money are thrown at elections, sometimes by groups, money can hollow out democracy. And yet you need that civic education to prepare people for it. In many countries, the government plays a role, but civil society organizations and the political parties. But of course, when you rely on political parties, the field may not be leveled. Some political parties may be very big with all resources, and others are squeezed out. But this is where I think civil society groups, young people organizing themselves to make a contribution, can help. And I would tell you, in some of these things, with serious organization, social networking and others, you can get a lot done. Much more done than sometimes people with lots of money. So be creative and reach out to your fellow citizens. On the question of permanent seat for Africa, I believe that the Security Council has to be reformed. The current structure of the Council reflects the geopolitical realities of 1945. It cannot be justified that today Africa, with 54 countries, doesn't have a single permanent seat. Latin America doesn't have one. India, with about a fifth of the world's population, doesn't have a seat. As Secretary General, I did put forward proposals recommending that permanent seats, albeit without vetoes, 2 for Africa, 1 for Latin America, 1 for India, and possibly 1 for Japan. But the member states could not agree on it. But I believe they cannot get away without reforming the Security Council for long. The emerging countries, like Indonesia, India, and others, South Africa, would insist on having a place at the table, and change has to come. That is the only way that we can get cooperation from everybody rather than destructive competition. On the question of students and change, I think this is something that I've seen many young people seeking change, taking initiatives at the university level, at the community level, trying to get change. Where they sometimes fail is they get frustrated. They get frustrated very quickly. They don't get results. They don't get support. They don't get money. And yet those who persevere manage to get it done. We have to understand that change or reform of any kind is a process. It's not an event. We talked about reform of the Security Council. I recall when I set up, I became Secretary General, I set about trying to reform the UN. Within 6 weeks, somebody managed to get an article in the New York Times complaining that I had not reformed the UN. It was, and I had monthly lunch with the Security Council. And that day, I was having the lunch with the Council. So I started by apologizing to the Council members for my failure to reform the UN Security Council, the UN organization and its agencies in 6 weeks flat. The Russian ambassador, who's today the Russian foreign minister, Sergei Lavrov, quoted the Bible at me. He said, Mr. Secretary General, what are you complaining about? You've had more time than God had in creating the world. And I responded, I said, Mr. Ambassador, you are right. But God had a unique advantage. He worked alone. Yeah. Of course, artists have a role to play. Culture plays an important role in societies. And sometimes through your paintings, your plays on stage, you incite us to think, to get us to laugh, to take our minds off things. And culture and art is part of society, and you do have a role to play. But you as an artist have to find your own way of making that contribution and getting us to pay attention. We all and each have to do it in our own way. I keep saying, if we all do our little bit, just our little bit, collectively we make a giant contribution. So I don't know whether you're a painter, you're a singer, you're a dancer, but keep at it. On the question of African resources and how Africans can benefit, another group I chaired, the Africa Progress Panel, issued a report. We released it here in South Africa in May, called Equity in Extractives, where we indicated that because of the way African governments manage their natural resources often the governments and the people do not get their fair share. It's opaque. We often don't even know how these contracts are signed. Through transfer pricing and other gimmicks and shell companies, lots of money is transferred out without the government getting the taxes that they deserve. I would recommend you look at the report, Extractive Industry. We talk of a situation where 5 deals were made in Congo. The concessions were almost given away, and the government lost $1.4 billion. Another one in Guinea, where Simondo, which is a hill, one of the most, with the richest deposit of iron ore, half of that concession was given to someone. Reports indicate that he paid less than $160 million, if that. Within 2 years, he sold half of that concession for $2.5 billion at 3,000% profit. And yet the people do not have schools and health. So we are suggesting that the action is also on our side. We need to work with the companies to ensure that the agreements are fair. We try to end corruption and ensure that the revenues that are generated through exploitation of these natural resources are invested in the well-being of the people, in education, in health, infrastructure, and energy. And finally, on the question of youth participation, I don't expect the youth or the young to take on the big corporations. Yes, they may go and work for the big corporations, but they can also set up their own groups. They can set up their own civil society organization, their own NGO, or a small company. And lots of young people are trying to do that. But what the government and society has to do is to make sure that they have access to financing and support and advice. Lots of young people are coming out of school, and when they don't find jobs, they try to set up their own company with friends. Some succeed, some do not. But we should not always come out and look for jobs. As I mentioned earlier, jobs are difficult these days, and I don't think it's a problem with the youth. It's the way we have managed the economies. And I would also urge governments, when they come up with national plans, to think very seriously about employment. Governments seem concerned when they are putting together national plans. They're more concerned about inflation, exchange rates, and GDP growth. But very few of them I really sit back and ask the question, what does this plan do for employment? What does it do for our youth? And I think more and more governments are beginning to, and the youth are also insisting we take their interest into consideration. And it is I would encourage you to team up and form your own small-scale or medium-sized companies. And I would also have you know that more jobs are created by the small-scale and medium-sized companies than the big ones. So you should also bear that in mind. Thank you very much, my friends, for giving me...
Thank you very much, Mr. Annan. Thank you.
Well, on that note, we conclude our special broadcast of the 3rd annual Desmond Tutu International Peace Lecture with former UN Secretary General Kofi Annan. We want to thank you very much for watching. And from all of us here at the University of the Western Cape, it's a very good night and goodbye.
God bless you always. God bless you and keep you. Happy birthday to you.
Yes. Yeah. Well,
Before I blow the candles, because it's not my birthday. That's the first embarrassment to my daughters. And this is the duty of every mama, is to embarrass her educated daughters. Fortunately, I've heard so many of how the mothers get embarrassed by their educated daughters, because one once said, at the graduation of her last daughter, the journalists, as you know, they are so curious about everything. Mom, tell us how you feel about your daughters getting degrees. And she said, I'm so happy. All my daughters have now passed away. So, anyway, please, I know that on time can say. But before I say a word of thanks to everyone, particularly, really, I would very much like to say a very big thank you to Dr. Kofi Annan. Kofi, you've been wonderful. Don't remind us about the story of the woman who borrowed money to go and hear Nkrumah. And because Dr. Nkrumah spoke English, and she knew as much English as I do, that this poor lady, when she got back home, she was asked, what did he say? He says, oh, he was fantastic. He was fantastic. Yes, but what did he say? Oh, it was just fantastic. It was just fantastic. You are fantastic. Thank you so much. Quite honestly, I think all of us, even those like me, the mic, I'm not used to these things. Even those of us who never darkened the doors of universities have learned something. And now we know what it's like to sit in a desk and listen to these highly educated people. My comrades in non-university education, haven't we learned something? Yes, we have. We can all pass away now. Thank you.
Join him.
What? We blow?
Yes.
Make a wish. 1, 2, 3.
Okay. And to my beautiful grandchildren, may I once more say thank you very much. May I introduce them, Lizo Tutu, my son's son.
Our.
That's why. At last,
Immaculate conception.
he accepts the responsibility. Ngomani, our middle daughter's daughter. Oh, sorry. Nyaniso Bar.